I rise today because of three numbers, three simple but important numbers: 100, 176, and 9. What do all those have to do with the matter that I think should be before us today? Well, it's been 176 days since President Obama did his job under the Constitution and nominated Chief Judge Merrick Garland of the D.C. Circuit Court, a consensus candidate, to our nation's highest court, following the untimely passing of Justice Scalia. And we have, of course, 100 senators whose challenge it is to find ways to work together across the aisle and to do our job and make progress for our country. But it's also been 100 years that the United States Senate has had a Judiciary Committee, a committee on which I have the honor of serving. And in the 100 years that we've had a Judiciary Committee in the United States Senate, we have never had this fact pattern where the president does his job under the Constitution and nominates an eminently qualified jurist, and the Senate Judiciary Committee just refuses to conduct a hearing, to give him a vote, to bring him to the floor, and to offer a final vote. Obviously, we have disagreements. We have disagreements in this body over principle and ideology. That's part of our job, is to come here representing our states and their different priorities and values. But to steadfastly refuse for 176 days to even convene a hearing, to even begin the process, to allow the American people to have some insight into the quality and caliber of the man nominated by our president strikes me as an unprecedented refusal. The first time in a century that we have so blatantly had one group in this body refusing to proceed. Our window for acting is closing, because in just a few weeks, on October 3rd, the Supreme Court's new term begins. So the refusal to act and to fill the 9th vacant seat has now had a serious ongoing impact on one term of the Supreme Court and now soon on a second term of the Supreme Court. We have never had a Supreme Court vacancy go this long in modern history. And in terms of the qualifications of the candidate, let's just take a quick look at the public record so far. A bipartisan group of former solicitors general, the lawyer of the United States, the person who represents the United States in court, often before the Supreme Court. So a bipartisan group of these former solicitors general, including Paul Clement, Ted Olson, Ken Starr, have endorsed Judge Garland as superbly qualified, as having, quote, demonstrated the temperament, intellect, and experience to serve, unquote, on the Supreme Court. This is not a sharply divisive nominee who is pursuing a particular ideological agenda. This is a well-regarded, well-respected, seasoned senior member of the federal judiciary. Top lawyers at 44 different U.S. companies have written the Senate calling Judge Garland exceptionally well qualified and noting that a prolonged vacancy continues to leave important, even vital business issues unresolved before the court, giving them a lack of predictability and leading them to have to make decisions in the absence of clear guidance from the court. Just yesterday, my colleagues and I joined some of Judge Garland's law clerks, former law clerks, in front of the Supreme Court. Because sometimes when I've had the opportunity to review nominees for federal judgeships, I like to hear from those who've previously worked for them. Well, in a letter to the Senate, a group of Judge Garland's former clerks noted that, quote, Chief Judge Garland deeply believes that our system of justice works best when those who see things differently are able to work together in a collegial manner to arrive at a just result, close quote. And yesterday we heard again firsthand accounts from Judge Garland's former clerks of his wisdom, his mentorship, his decency, his commitment to justice. I wish that we could follow the same approach here in the Senate that Judge Garland's clerks, other former co-workers have said he followed in the Department of Justice as a career prosecutor and as a judge on the D.C. Circuit, an approach that focuses on collegiality and consensus. I had the honor of meeting with Judge Garland on April 7th, and in addition to his truly impressive intellect and his compelling and long judicial experience, our conversation revealed to me a person of real character, good judgment, deep sensitivity, thoughtfulness. And I wish I had the opportunity in front of a public hearing of the Judiciary Committee to ask him similar questions that would allow my constituents, the President's constituents, other members of this body to ask and answer important questions before the American people, before a committee of this body, before our colleagues, so that we could do our job and move forward. Yet we haven't had this hearing, the hearing that the American people so need and deserve. In May, my Democratic colleagues held a public meeting to try and further explore and air Judge Garland's background, where we heard from 4 esteemed, significant, experienced individuals deeply familiar with Chief Judge Garland's experience and character: a former Court of Appeals judge, a former U.S. attorney, a former cabinet secretary, and a University of Chicago law professor who clerked for Judge Garland, all 4 of whom urged us to move forward and consider his nomination. Of those 4, Judge Lewis's testimony has particularly stuck with me. Here's someone nominated by President George H.W. Bush in September of 1992, which, to the best of my recollection, was an election year. He was then confirmed by a democratically controlled Senate in October of 1992, less than a month before a hotly contested presidential election. Judge Lewis previously came to the Senate to testify in support of then-Judge Samuel Alito of the Third Circuit before his elevation to the Supreme Court. Judge Lewis warned us earlier this year in this meeting in May that what we are doing is not only deadlocking the Supreme Court, it is diminishing it. Mr. President, our system of justice, our federal courts, our constitutional order is one of America's most precious assets. As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, I've had the honor of traveling to other countries to represent our country, most often on bipartisan delegations to other countries where we are urging them to follow our model. And sadly, in too many countries I have visited, they cannot depend upon their judiciary to be truly independent, to enforce the rule of law, to issue judgments that are in keeping with their laws, their traditions, or most importantly, their Constitution. And that's why I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we are engaging in this unprecedented refusal to follow the rules, to follow the process of the Constitution and this Senate, and to give this important nominee a hearing. That's why I'm disappointed by Leader McConnell and Chairman Grassley in their refusal to consider Judge Garland's qualifications. It is my hope that they will reconsider. With Chief Judge Garland's nomination, President Obama fulfilled one of his most important constitutional responsibilities. Now, all 100 senators on this 176th day that we are waiting to fill this 9th vacancy on the Supreme Court must do our jobs and provide appropriate advice and possibly consent to the president's nominee. The Senate has a valuable opportunity to show our constituents, the American people, and the world that even in the midst of a divisive presidential campaign, our democratic system, our constitutional system, still works. We cannot allow year-long Supreme Court vacancies to become routine. And I'm deeply concerned about the manner in which the Senate is conducting itself and the possibility that this unprecedented inaction will set a precedent for future vacancies and send a signal to the world that our constitutional order cannot still function. I remain hopeful that my colleagues will give serious thought to the systemic consequences of what we're doing through the refusal to even hold a hearing on Judge Garland. It is long past time to put the good of our nation and Constitution above the politics of the day and get to work on this confirmation. Thank you.